Hey, Ben here again with Studio on the Lake. Hey, a character by the name of, initials R.E. Romeo Echo asked us about Shorebird. So we're going to crank out two-part video here. This will go all the way through painting, but this will be a curlew sandpiper. So here we got the sandpiper pattern, and I just grabbed one, a picture of a sandpiper, and blew it up to the size that I wanted. Now this is a little bit smaller. It's probably 70%, 60 or 70% of the size of the bird. You saw the big chunk of basswood there at the beginning. I was running low, so that's another piece I pulled out of the top of the studio. Cut that down maybe 2 inches thick. I don't know, you'll see that in a second. And I'm laying the pattern out. So that little stump on the bottom is where his leg goes in, and I should have left that. I take that off a little bit later on. But here's the blank, and I didn't have a side view, but you'll notice that I kind of cut him on a bend, and I placed his head facing a little bit to the left. I tend to carve things. That's the way I like to look at birds, with the head facing to the left side. I very rarely, I don't know why I very rarely carve it with the intention of the bird showing or being placed so that the head is on the right side. It's just a freak thing in my brain. All right, so I've told you before, don't do this. If you do, put on a big asbestos glove, that sort of thing, because this thing's dangerous. And I'm really just taking small bites of it, and I can feel over the years the way that this sander is going to bite. You can see it's starting to chatter a little bit there. So I'm just contouring. You can do this with a knife, take it all the way. You can do it on do it with a knife. You can do it with chisels, etc., etc. It's just a little bit quicker. If you've got not an orbital, but a spindle sander, a lot of people will do that. You can take your bandsaw table and cant that at a 45-degree angle and get that in there. But I just have grown to doing this over the years, and it allows me to remove a lot of wood quickly to get down to it. Now this is going to be a decorative, and like I said, I asked all you folks what you wanted to see, and a lot of you wanted to see more birds. So this is the second in the bird series. It's long-winded. I go through a lot of I left a lot of the stuff in there in the editing, because it is a teaching video. And this one I will paint at the end, and then it's going to go on he'll go on a stand. So I got the blank cut out. You can see that I put reference lines in there. The reference lines left and right, all four corners, and then everything in between gets rounded down to leave those lines. If I didn't have those lines in there, there would be a tendency maybe to overwork a particular area. And what you saw right there, the way I run these videos, if you haven't subscribed to the channel before or been to the channel before, you'll notice that I'll stop and stare at a piece, and I'm actually looking through that to see if the shape on the outline is correct. When I do birds, I tend to start and get pretty close on the head, get the head down to the point where I can put eyes in the head, and then I'll move on to the rest of it. But primarily I try to get the head right. If the head's not right, and once I've got the head right, the rest of it kind of falls into place. That's a Quetzal burr. It's one of the medium ones. It's not an extreme. I am running this portion here at 2 times the speed. All told, I think there's a little more time in this one because of the burning. This one's probably got 8 hours in it when I get done. And you'll see a little bit of the burning in the end of this one. And then the second one, I'll finish up all the burning on that. It's a micro handpiece that came from PJL Enterprises over in Minnesota. They're hard to find. It's a small company. This is the newer one they make, and that's 40,000 RPM. One of these days, I want to get an air handpiece that's run by air that runs into hundreds of thousands, like Just Carve Rob has. But basically, I'm too cheap. I don't want to spend the $500 for it. I suppose I should one of these days. So I've got the head shaped down, and somewhere in the middle I skipped a little footage when I rounded out, but I put a groove and eye sockets in there, and this is where the eye line is going to go. You can see that I don't have the beak in this because the sandpipers have that long beak. And if I was to do a shorebird, I probably will a smoothie bean that does not have feathers carved into it. It's just painted on, and it's a little cruder. They are decoys, and they were typically with a dowel in the bottom of one leg, and they stuck them out in the sand, and that would cause other birds to come, and then they could shoot them and eat them. And they didn't have glass eyes, but they'd have a nail bent and stuck in for a beak, and I was contemplating putting the nail in this guy's beak, and I decided later on not to do that. Alright, so my glass eyes, I order them all from a company called Tohican, and if I remember, I keep forgetting, and I need to send Jordy the link, Jordy Johnson over at Just Carve, or Carving Fusion. Jordy wants to know where those came from, and they're Tohican glass eyes, Jordy. And if I remember one of these days, I'll send you the link to that. I also am I'm cutting out patterns of all the things that I do, and I'm going to send them to Just Carve Rob, and I'm going to send them to Jordy. I'm going to mail these guys a couple of patterns as I think about it. I might even send one over to Calvin. And it'll be then I'll carve the piece, but those guys get hung up on and end up carving a lot of the stuff I carve. My father-in-law, when I was spending time in Kosovo, when we had that Kosovo deployment and the Serbia issue back in in the 90s, I would sit up all night working on the quick reaction force, flying. Of course, we had 2 helicopters. And we had a couple of infantry squads that could throw them on the helicopter, take them out to a hot spot in the middle of the night, and under night vision goggles. So I would sit in my office. I was the instructor pilot, and I was the adult leadership for the night group. But I would carve, and people would stop by in the morning on the way to. I think we worked 7 to 7, something like that. And people would stop in and see what I had carved the night before. Well, my father-in-law was doing carousel animals at that time, and he would cut out a blank 2 blanks when he was doing a carousel animal like specifically one time a giraffe. And what's really kind of neat is I didn't see his carving until a year or so later when I came back, but the references that I pulled down on the web, and how I carved the giraffe from the pattern that he'd sent over, or the blank, they look remarkably similar, which is kind of neat. So I'm going to send out some patterns of different things that I'm doing. Jordy's asked for them, so I thought I'd send him some, and then also Just Carve Rob, because we've got to keep Rob honest. And he hurt his finger again, as you notice. we need to come up with another name for him other than just carve Rob, because he keeps damaging himself. I think maybe Rob might be voted as the guy most likely to be killed in a random shooting in McDonald's. Just got bad luck, keeps hurting himself. Be careful, Rob. Hard to keep a YouTube channel going when you keep messing up your fingers and your hands, man. I wonder once in a while if this carving gig is, I'm setting those eyes. You've seen me set the eyes before as I ramble on. It's done with quickwood. This one I am intentionally leaving an eyelid around that guy. I push the eye in, a little bit of it squeezes out, and I do that with the cut into the knife, and then I come back and take off just a little bit, and then I press indentations in where the feather lines are going to come away from the eyes, because you don't want to touch this stuff with any of those bits, the diamond bits or whatever. Now if you do end up touching one of these eyes and getting a dull spot on there, you could put some clear fingernail polish on there, but you can see sort of there that I'm cutting really small feather groups around that eye. And that's pretty much how they go in. This one I left a little bit space around the outside of the eye. I like the eyes to set down in there, and he is going to be painted, so it's not important that it be a complete fit. But and then I'm going to come back, leaving that ridge now. As soon as I'm done with that, I'll push the eye in just a tad more. I think that's where I was trying to show you. I'm shooting this from so far away, like 5 feet away, in a wide angle, that I can't get down in the nitty-gritty here. But you kind of see an idea of what I'm up to here around that eye. Now this can be done with the quickwood after you've done all the carving. Like some of the bigger decoys, I'll put an eyelid around them after the fact, after I'm done with all the carving. And you just simply roll that stuff into a really fine tube, long enough to go clear around the eye, and then you gently sculpt it into the eye and you get an eyelid. That's an old trick that a lot of waterfowl carvers, the decorative decoy guys, do. You can see the body there's got knife cuts on it. When I was playing around, getting the shape down just right, I grabbed the knife and took quite a bit off of the body. The eyes make these guys come alive. They really do. So I'm happy with the eyes, and I've got a little bitty diamond taper, and I'm just starting to set in the feather pattern on the head. And this one is going to get the full treatment, the burning treatment, the whole 9 yards. You don't have to burn these, and you'll see later on that I do some stuff with a stone, or ceramic stone. It has kind of a sharp edge to it. I'll cut some feathers in around the body. Some of the bigger birds I do, the loons and whatnot, I very rarely will pick up the burner, except on critical parts. And once you paint it, those little lines, if you cut them in there right, and you can see I'm kind of cutting them in a running pattern. And I don't know why I normally draw some reference lines on there, but and then I'm coming back and putting little bumps in around those cheeks. And I'm going to come up to the beak, but I'm not going to do a whole lot of detail till a little bit later on the beak, because I'm not exactly sure how I want that to come out. These little bumps that I'm putting in here with this micro carver, are gonna make the burning pen run up and down over the ridges. It'll cut a little bit deeper on the high ridge and then shallower down in the valley. It makes a real nice effect, and you'll see that coming along here. And then when I get to painting on this, I'm really just doing kind of a wash and a little bit of dry brush over top of the feathers. I'm not painting them in each feather. I'm letting the burn stuff, or the burn color, show through a little bit, and you'll get a chance to see that if you're patient enough, or if you happen to zoom ahead. But you can see I'm kind of working back with the flow. Had I put the lines in, I wish I had reference lines so you can see what I'm doing there, but they kind of contour around the top of the head, and then they meet right in the middle of that eye socket. And once again, you see I stop a lot and look at it, and then I'll do both sides of it kind of at the same time, so that the head is symmetrical. This is going to get a sequence of 2 or 3 times with that little diamond. Then it'll get burned and brushed off and burned and brushed off probably 3 or 4 times. So at this point I can bring the beak down just a little bit more because I'm getting ready to burn feathers, and so I want that to be a little bit more refined right there in the head. I'm not going to do a whole bunch on the end of it. I'm going to leave a little bit of waste wood until I decide when to put whether I'm going to put a nail in there or another. So here's what a smoothie looks like, and you're going to see a date on this. This is one that I kept around and I never painted, and these are probably circa 2000, so this would be 21 years ago. But I really liked I was playing with some shapes, and I liked these so much after I got them all smooth that I decided I didn't want to do anything else with them. And you can see that's March of '09, so I lied. It wasn't 2000, it's 2009. But these are ones that I've kept, and I haven't put eyes in this one or done anything or painted on them. I just kind of like the wooden shape of them, so I kept them. But that's an example of a smoothie. The feathers would not be carved in, they would be painted on. This guy is going to get the full Magilla, the full detail treatment. So now I'm doing what I said I should have done when I was messing around with that little taper diamond bit. I'm putting in the flow lines, so as I start to burn, each of the feathers will start to flow in that general direction, and it just helps kind of bring the bird alive. If you've watched the Baby Bird series, this is pretty much the same burning pattern, although it's going to have a little bit larger feathers on it than that one did. This is real time, and this is where the reference lines come in. I start down around the beak and then come back, and this will get, like I said, probably 3 or 4, maybe even 5 passes. So you can't do just one pass and get away with it. It's been my experience. It's better if you do 2 or 3 passes at a bare minimum and continue to refine these feathers. You can see that I'm starting down in the eye socket, in the bottom of the eye groove, and then bringing those up around the contour of the head. And this is real time. That pen is part of a combo, and here jumped ahead, and I think I'm going 2.5 times the speed of this, so you can see what I'm up to on this. This looks tedious, and people tell me a lot of times, hey, I don't have any, how do you have patience to do that? Well, this is actually very relaxing. I've got my butt parked in a comfortable chair. I've got something or other from Netflix on, some mindless show that I don't have to pay attention to. It's making noise in the background, or a lot of times I'll play some music in the background while I'm doing this. I've got a stove. It's a big old pot-bellied stove that came out of a caboose on a train, and up north here, and it does a really nice job. I get a fire going in that. It's cold up here in Wisconsin this time of year, although this year we've been lucky. But typically it's in the teens or lower in some cases, 5 degrees. So this is where the lines come in, and I'm not seeing them real clear in the video, but they're on there in pencil, and you can see that the feathers are getting bigger as they go closer to the back. So this is I've done shorebirds before. I don't have any. I haven't kept any of them, so I can't show them to you. They've all been sold over the years. Shorebirds is kind of East Coast thing, Maryland, that sort of thing. That's just like a lot of the eagles and larger stuff tend to sell better out on the East Coast. Just that's what people are into. But this would be down around Maryland, New Jersey, that sort of stuff, where the ocean sets up, and they have a hunting history, and that's really where the decoys came out of, Chesapeake Bay, that sort of thing, and they were primarily used for hunting. And nowadays, as you know, a lot of them end up worth thousands of dollars, and people are using them as decorations, hence the name decorative decoy. So kind of the same pattern as the baby bird. I do the top of the head, and then I'll come back and put in the cheeks on the bottom of the head. So you can see here, if you didn't put reference lines in, at some point you'd space off and end up putting these feathers groupings running into a weird direction. So what this little brass brush does, if you didn't watch the baby bird video, is it takes off a lot of the carbon and the burnt on there, and allows it to stand out. It just mellows them a little bit. And interestingly enough, if I were to burn this today and then come back tomorrow and start burning again, it mellows as it sits there, gets lighter. The newer ones will have a darker burn line. So there's the initial burn, and it's kind of hard to see what's going on, but this is going to get 2 or 3 more run-throughs, and then I will go over this with a little bit with a stone finally at the end. But that's how the head and the initial part of the burn is done. So here comes the second pass, and I'm not going to torture you with the whole thing, but now I'm putting finer lines in there. I'm working with the ones that I already have there, but I'm finishing up those little feather groups. like I said, this would be done 3, 4, 5 times or more, as many as you need to get the depth that you need, or the depth that I like when I'm doing these. All of this will read through the paint, each line, and then it helps as if you're doing a little dry brushing on them. The ridges will catch the paint, but the under portion will not. So you could paint darker down below and then lighter up on the top portion. So a lot of this is overkill. I could have come back probably with a stone and got the same effect. Once you paint it, a line in there, whether it's burned or scratched or put in with a stone, all reads the same with the paint on there. There's a second burn. That's the first burn on that side. And then, as per the norm, I'll come back with my brass brush. And these are just cheap brass brushes. And that's the result of number 2 pass on the head. So there's a stone. These came from Germany, and I'm starting to run out of them. They're just a little Proxima stone, and I'm using just the corner of that. And I'm kind of doing a little scoop motion, kind of a little circular down into the left, and then lightly coming up on the end. And you can see that I'm connecting these feathers and letting them run. This is pretty effective if you're trying to make a fine feather hair grouping come up over another one. And that is real time that I'm doing that. And again, I'm kind of staying with the flow. You can see as I'm going through here. And believe it or not, look, there we go. I think that's the 3rd time. And at this point, I've got most of what I want in there. I'm just finishing up the little feathers and connecting the dots, as it were. You don't have to do this many, but it makes a big difference on the end. And the goal is not to do what I'm doing here, which is trying to finish this up on a teaching video. So I just grabbed a bit, and I'm showing you kind of what's going to happen, or I think might happen with the beak. It turns out it doesn't. I put wood in there. But you take a big nail and stick it in the end, and you'd get his beak. Okay, you can see what's going on here. The next thing I'm going to put in is the feathers on the back. So I'm just kind of laying out the groupings. You can see the coverlets on the front there. I'm going to delineate that portion out, and then it's starting to get into the wing wingtips. So I've got the basic groupings, and I pulled them off a pattern. And this is just a photo. And again, this is not going to be accurate, but I'm going to get in the ballpark so that this sort of it will read just fine. But it wouldn't be good enough for a competition piece because I'm not going to pay that much attention to the actual numbers of feathers. I talked about it in the baby bird. You have 5 fingers on your hand. If you hold your hand out, it looks like it's supposed to. If you were to add one more finger to that, everybody would know that you screwed it up. And consequently, if you were to take a finger away, it also would be screwed up. That's what you have with these birds. Now, of course, most people are not knowledgeable enough about birds unless they're really interested in them to have the exact number of feathers. But if you're doing a competition piece, you definitely want to do the study and do that. So I've laid out the groupings on there. It's hard to tell. I know what I'm doing. It's hard for you to see what I'm up to there. But there's the basic, and I'm ignoring the tail and the wingtips. So here's a ruby bit, and I'm just going to take a groove down through there, and then I'm going to come back and round those feather groupings over. If you have a really good pattern, or if you're doing a competition piece that's going to be judged by a bird expert, it would behoove you to have a much better pattern as opposed to freehanding like I did there, and actually take some time and do some study. So now I've grooved down in there, and now I'm just going to round over each feather group. Looks like he's got a group on his back, up on the top of his shoulders, behind his head. The breast really has nothing in there. I'm going to show you how I get away with just using a stone for the breast and underneath the bottom there. And you'll notice also that I went and cut that leg feather grouping off, because at the time I thought initially I was going to take him and put him on a piece of wood and make it look like his feet were going into the water. So I left the feather grouping on the bottom, and then as I went along I thought, no, I'm just going to put him on a dowel, one dowel. And then as you'll see in the second video, which is in editing right now, it's waiting on him to dry on the paint, more specifically on the matte finish and then the gloss on the base. I went ahead and put those back in, and I'll show you how I do that in the second video. So when you're doing feathers, if you take some time and study, you can actually buy a thing that's called a cape, and that's a grouping of feathers. If you really want to do competition pieces, they'll skin a bird, whatever species you want, and then you can lay that cape out and use it as a pattern. And you'll notice that some feathers are proud and standing out, and others are a little bit overlapped in that. And that's just kind of what I'm trying to do on some of this. So when they come down into that groove where the tops of the wing coverlets, and I'm almost there now, you'll notice that I'm cutting some feathers that are kind of underneath other feathers. In other words, they overlap as they come down in there. To me, what makes these come alive is there's an undercut right there. You don't want these to be necessarily as sloppy as I'm doing, because I'm doing a demo piece here, obviously, and I'm trying to do it fairly quickly for you guys. But on the other hand, you don't want them to be perfect either. If they're perfect, then it has a plastic look about it, and that's just not a good look either. There is a style of carving where you do real clean work on it, and that would probably, you'd be okay with that. all this stuff that I'm showing you, you don't have to do this way. This is just something that's worked for me over the years. And if you're a bird carver watching this, you will know that I'm screwing up these feather patterns. But hey, I'm showing you how to do them, not necessarily making it perfect. But I guarantee you it's going to look good when it's done. How about that? Now these feathers are getting a little bit bigger as they come towards the back. I do have the reference sitting off, probably the left front there, probably sitting on that stump, propped up, because I'm starting to get down into a transition area at the bottom there, and I'm going to stop in that because I haven't put the tips of the wings in there. Now the wings are going to be right wing over top of left wing, and when you look at the reference, they go all the way down and stop pretty much even with the tail, and the tail is underneath the wings. So now we're down into a transition area, and I haven't shaped that area, so I'm going to stay away. Now, another thing that you're going to see in a minute here when I contour these feathers over at that bottom layer, I'm going to not finish the bottom half of it, and the reason for that is there are little fine feathers that sweep up from the belly. So I'm back to a ruby bit. This is a pretty worn out ruby bit. And what I'm doing here is I'm shaping those feathers prior to burning and the stoning. So the feather above, I'm just carving deeper underneath each of those. Each feather will come out, and you can see I'm putting the tip right in that little pocket. And then I'm going to come back and round those over a little bit, and then they'll get 2 or 3 burning passes just like the rest of the, just like the head did. And I am staying in the flow of the whole thing. And sometimes I might even do it to this, I don't remember. I'll come back with a round ball and round those over a little bit. In this case I didn't. You can see I'm using the ball on the back of that. And here's the transition from the back going down into the winglet covers. You can see that I started at the front, and I'm cutting each feather back in. This is just like if you were to lay out a group of shingles, that's the way the feathers are set up. One lays over on top of the other. And you're really not getting the whole feather at this point, because the majority of it is layered underneath the one above it. So here I'm not going to undercut those bottom ones a whole lot, and the reason is I'm going to start leaving those as we go along, because I'm going to come back and there gets a little fine plume almost that comes up over, and right there I'm cutting deep into the pocket where each feather joins up into the next one, and then I'm going to come back and round each of those feathers over a little bit. Man, these teaching videos, they ramble on forever. I don't know how you guys stand it. All right, so that's what I talked about earlier. I got a little diamond ball in there, and I'm doing each individual feather and feathering it down into the next one. And this is all in preparation for the burning. So I'm rounding over each of these, keeping in mind where I want them to, kind of the direction that I want the feather to show or read. I'm getting them fairly smooth. If you are doing a competition piece, you're going to get them really smooth. I'm going to leave these a little bit rough. Now it's time to put in the barbs. So the feather barbs, you're not going to be able to see them on the little feathers, but you will on these. And there needs to be a flow to them to keep them from. This is what makes the direction of the feather stand out. And you can go back and check your pattern out and do the detail work. So here I'm cutting these in a little bit. I got them a little rough with the stone, and this is going to allow me to run the one feather on top of the other feather and get a real good smooth deal going. So you can see that I've ran one on each of the barbs, and now I'm going back and putting in the second, and I'm tilted a little bit to the side. I'm not concerned about getting these 100%, and I can leave them a little bit fat and a little bit proud, because I'm going to come back with a stone and clean these up a little bit. So you're going to see on here some of these look to be pretty fat, and when I'm done with the burning and the rest of the stuff, the stoning, those will eventually get worn down, and they'll read just as one little barb or nub sticking up in the middle. So now I've got a little taper bit, and I'm running down the sides of those because the barb will stick up just a little bit higher than the feather. And I'm doing each side, and you can see that that's starting to take a lot of that off there. So here's the burn part, and at this point I'm gonna stop yammering and let you space out and watch this burn, and I'll pick up a little bit later in the video with the voiceover. So you saw that I came all the way down on each of these feathers, and I'm going from the barb, and I'm doing one side at a time. I did all of one side. You don't have to do that. You can switch back and forth however you want to do it. Depends on how anal you are. I typically will do one side, the majority of them, and then come back and do the second one. Keep in mind, to make these look right and get the number of lines in here that you need, you'll read stuff on, if you read something on bird carving, they'll talk about 1,000 lines per inch. I tend to find that a little bit on the ridiculous side. I don't think you can get 1,000 lines in there. Maybe you can. I can't. And I don't even want to guess. Just like jelly beans in a jar, I really don't care how many are on there. There needs to be enough to make it look right. And you'll notice that as I'm burning, I'm changing the angle that I'm coming down and on the barbs. And there's no way to learn this other than doing it. If you do straight lines across each feather and one pull, some feathers require that. You can grab feathers or whatever you're working on, get a reference, and do them exactly like that. I have done. If you go back, if you haven't subscribed, you need to, because you need to go back and go through 140 different videos. I've done an eagle feather that I found out in the yard, and I did it actually true to life from the actual feather. And that'll give you a little bit more of an idea of how this feather burning is done. But this is a pretty good demonstration right here, I think. And you'll notice that I haven't went and shaped the back or the belly or the tail. I'm just working this feather grouping out and finishing it up, and then I'll come back and add the other as we go along here. And you're not going to get that portion in this video. And the second one, I'm not going to torture you nearly as much. And also, you'll notice that I didn't do the other side. So these I'm pointing out right now. Those are the ones I was talking about earlier that I'm not going to burn them in. I have a plan, and I'm not going to. I shouldn't have said burn them in. I didn't carve those up because you can see those little sweep marks on the pencil there. In the final bird, which you'll get to see in the second video, there's little fine hairs that curve up from the belly and are actually on top of the other feathers. And in the feather carving world, those are the hardest feathers to do, is ones that cut over top of another feather. I've done some really fancy birds with their wing half pulled open and them preening and working on it, and you really have to plan those feather groupings out and the way they extend out and that sort of stuff. You can go berserk and nuts on this stuff. So that was one pass, and you can see that I've missed some stuff in there. You can also see that how the barbs are starting to come out, and you're kind of getting an idea of what the feather flow is going to do. Again, you'll notice I'm leaving the bottom of that wing alone. So here comes another pass, and in this one I'm doing a little bit of overrun, and I'm going to let the feather go down into the second feather below it. So I want to do a little bit of overlap here. And the more passes you make on this, the finer you can get the detail. And don't be afraid to grab a burr and come back in if you don't like the shape that the feather is. You can fix that. I didn't fix it. I was looking at this character as I'm going along, and I was thinking that I had too much on the top of his head. The top of his head was too fat, and that's actually true if you look at my reference material. But since it's a teaching video, I was too lazy to go back and reshape the top of his head and then put all the burning back in. I thought he was fine for what he is. If you're interested in seeing this guy or purchasing this guy, he's going to go up on the Etsy page. He's not a commission piece. Like I said, a character named R.E. asked if I would do some shorebirds. I asked what you guys would like to see, and that was one of the things that came up. So I'm doing this whole bird series. And sad to say, looking at the numbers, the birds are not as popular as the wands. A Harry Potter magic wand is getting 3 or 4 times the number of views that a bird gets. So, luck of the draw in life, I guess. So, hey, that's the end of part 1. Stand by for part 2. And as always, comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake.